Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Cameras and Coffee, the first one in quite a while. I've been busy. So if you're a fan of this channel, you have almost certainly heard that Adox is about to release another color film, an ultra slow ISO film, and we're going to talk about that right after this. For today's coffee, I am enjoying from New Harvest Coffee Roasters, this bag, the Jonathan Zapata, which, if you're guessing by the size of that bag, yes, this is a coffee I really enjoy. That's a good one. It's got this very fruity sort of, not sweet, not quite sweet, but very like fruity flavor to it. Anyway, so let's talk about the new Adox 1.5 ISO film. I haven't used it yet. Will I get it to make a video about? Probably. So you're going to get all the standard information that you could get that's available right now from any of the websites and places that have talked about it. So instead of talking about this specific film, I'm going to tell you about the experience of shooting 1.5 ISO film because I've done it a lot, and I have a pretty good idea of what to expect. So what have I shot that is 1.5 ISO? About 10 years ago, I picked up a 2,000-foot spool of Kodak 2383, which is an interpositive or internegative film. I forget which. I think it's interpositive. Can be developed C41, apparently. I've never done it successfully. So I've always cross-processed it as black and white. And developed with times for T-Max 100, it develops appropriately at 1.5 ISO. And I've had the opportunity to both develop it, or to print it traditionally and digitize it as well. So I'm going to go through the process of shooting it and developing it and printing and digitizing it and tell you what is really easy and what's not. So what's really easy is loading it in your camera, and that's pretty much where it ends. When you shoot it in full sun, if you're used to the Sunny 16 rule, it's more like Sunny 2.8 with 1.5 ISO. And actually that's not correct. Sunny 16 would be 1.5 seconds at f16. At 2.8, at f2.8, I was generally shooting it at around 1/30th of a second. That's the exposure value conversion. So very slow film, 1/30th at wide open or almost wide open on most lenses in full sun. So what does it mean that this is going to be used for? Pretty much anything, as long as you don't need action shots, right? The next thing about it, so for landscapes, really nice. The 2383 has amazing detail for landscapes and great tonality. Waterfalls, cloud trails, those things like that become very easy with a film like that, especially if you want to stop down to f16, 22, or 32. I mean, think about it. At 1.5 ISO, at f32, your pre-reciprocity failure exposure time is going to be 6 seconds. So by the time you throw in reciprocity failure, you're probably in the 12 to 15 second range. Haven't seen technical data for the Adox film yet, so I don't know exactly how long it will be. But at that length of shutter speed, a waterfall photo, a landscape with clouds that have a little bit of motion blur in them become very attainable. Also, 1.5 ISO, if you're guessing that it's a fine grain film, we're going to get to that. You have no idea. But it's going to be really flattering for portraits because it's going to capture a lot of detail about the person. 1.5 ISO, the 2383 that I've shot, is so much finer grain than any lens I have ever owned can deliver, that you don't have to worry about your lenses not being sharp enough for this film stock. I would imagine that something similar will be true for the new ultra low ISO Adox film. So the one major complication with using it is that most cameras, in fact, maybe all, I'm trying to think of, the A1 goes down to 6 ISO. I don't think there's a single film SLR that goes down to 1.5 ISO. So a big challenge with metering this film is going to be either having a handheld light meter, or if you have a camera that only goes down to, say, 25 ISO, 12, 6, 3, 1.5, you have to add 4 stops of light every time you shoot this film, and it also means cameras that have automatic DX code reading, not going to work at all with this film, at all. You're not going to be able to push it to 100 ISO. So at any rate, so really 2383 has a really fine grain and really good tonal rendition, and I would expect that the Adox film will perform in a similar manner. So in addition to the challenges of long shutter speed and calculating the added exposure time with your camera, because your camera's not going to go to an ISO that slow, when it comes time to developing it, that in and of itself will probably not be any different than usual. Then when it comes to printing it, this is where you run into your next challenge. In the darkroom, if you have a grain focuser, the grain on 2383, when I've shot it, is so fine that it can't be discerned with a grain focuser, even like a 10 or 15x, right? The way that a grain focuser works is you set it on the focusing platen that you're going to print the negative onto under your enlarger. You flip on the light, and then you look through an eyepiece to adjust the focus, and you know you're in focus when the grains snap into focus in that focuser. With 2383, and I'm again going to guess this, something similar will be true for this new Adox film, the grain is so small, it's impossible to make it out with a grain focuser. That's a real challenge when it comes to getting things to snap into focus. I've developed Adox CMS 20 in a traditional enlarger, and a grain focuser does allow the grain to be perceived with that film. 2383 as a 1.5 ISO film is super, super hard to focus. So if you want to do color negative developing with this new Adox film, you can expect something highly similar to be the case, and you may need to, instead of using a grain focuser, get something like a stronger focusing loop or something like that. I don't know exactly how to do it. When I did develop 2383 exposures on an enlarger, I just did away with the grain focuser and kind of eyeballed it. And what I do is I'd grab a sheet of dead photo paper and then put that under so I knew the proper focus plane, and then use my eyes to just kind of gauge when the scene was properly in focus. And it turned out okay most of the time. Similar issue with digitizing. Okay, when I digitize 35 millimeter or any other negative size film with my digital camera, I'll enlarge in live view to the maximum extent and then use that live view enlargement like a grain focuser in traditional developing. That way I can actually focus on the grain instead of trying to look at the image to get a focus. With 2383, and I'm going to assume the same thing is going to be true with this new Adox film, the grain is so small that digital cameras can't zoom in far enough to allow grain level focusing. You're not going to see individual flecks of grain, but you can see the clumps of grain, both with grain enlargers and with digital cameras. And when those get sharp, then you know you have proper focus. So with digitization, if you're going to use a digital camera for this, what you've got to do is grab a negative from another kind of film, focus on that, and then use that and make sure that your focus is locked down really well when you go to then digitize your 2383. So those are some things that I've experienced shooting 1.5 ISO films. I would expect they're going to be very similar, if not identical, with this new Adox film. I am really looking forward to getting my hands on it as soon as I can, and probably putting out a something about film video based on a handful of rolls of film on it. So at any rate, very exciting news. I'm really looking forward to it. I hope you guys are too. And Steinbeck's looking forward to getting his stitches out, aren't you? Yes, you are. You'll be very happy again soon. Have a good day, everybody, and I'll see you in the next Cameras and Coffee.